Welcome back. Let's continue with our local history. We're now in Old Town San Diego, in the place that gave birth to California. Right behind me, there is Casa de Estudillo, one of the old haciendas from that period. Not many people know the history of San Diego when it comes to the Mexican-American War, but it played a very important role, not just at the Battle of San Pascual, but in general, how the families themselves were split during this conflict. It might be surprising to you to know that some California families supported the American presence here in California, and in fact the takeover. Many of them, like the Bandinis for example, saw their future perhaps better under the American political control. The economics, the politics, frankly, during the Mexican period were a little bit chaotic, and many of them saw a better future under the American system. Yet other Mexicanos, other Californios, fought for Mexico bravely, such as in the Battle of San Pascual, to defend their, of course, Mexican Republic from the American aggression. You might be surprised that it only took 160 American sailors under the leadership of Commodore Stockton to take over the port of San Diego, and frankly the town of San Diego. But remember a couple of things. One, the town itself of San Diego under the Mexican presence had a very small population and even smaller military presence. Now beyond that, again as we mentioned before, many of the Californios, including those living in San Diego, had already a long history of trading with the Americans. And many of them, again, saw their future perhaps better off under the American political control. Let's not forget that California and its ports were always of interest to the American government. Every single American president since the American independence saw with interest the possible acquisition of the Spanish Northern Territories, in particular California. In fact, in 1842, in a very interesting episode, Commodore Caspi Jones invaded what today is Monterrey. Back then, it was the Mexican capital of Alta California, assuming that the war had already started between the United States and Mexico. Many historians see this as an example of the willingness of the United States to go to war if they had to acquire, of course, California. This eventually would occur in 1848 at the end of the Mexican-American War, including here, again, in Old Town San Diego. Here we are in Casa de Estudillo, a historical landmark here in Old Town San Diego. The founder, Jose Antonio Estudillo, was the head of a family, like many families here in Old Town San Diego, that had intermarried, that had a different view, frankly, of La Patria Chica, what is back then Mexico, of course, and here the local community. A community that was very diverse. In fact, Dr. Rudo del Castillo compares it to a small sort of New York, where you have familias that were from, obviously, Spain, Mexico, but also Portuguese familias. You had also familias from Chile, from Peru, and many of them eventually intermarried. And so they have a different perspective, frankly, of what was Mexico, again, La Patria Chica, and again, here their own community. Many of them were willing to accept the Americans as part of this micro, if you will, small melting pot, if you will. Follow us as we go forward in looking more into these familias, the ranchos, and the haciendas in this important part of our local history. Here we are at another home of the transition period, again going from the Mexicano pueblo to the American presence, in the Machados and Silva's home. As we go forward again, we'll see this and other examples of the familias that were part of this important part of our history. I hope you enjoy the rest of the lecture as we go forward.